Hello everyone, this is John from RPGs and More. And in today's episode, I would like to talk with you about... I was just checking to see, I forgot for a moment what I had carved on this mug, or engraved in this mug, so I was like, oh my goodness. Anyway, enough digression on that one. I wanted to talk to you about the game, or at least an aspect of the game, Forbidden Lands, because I'm finally starting to dig into the Forbidden Lands player's guide, and I've been reading it a little bit. I don't get much time, so I read little bits here and there when I can. I'm about maybe halfway through the book right now. It's been about a week, and that's just how things go sometimes. But I've seen a few things that I really like, and I finally got to the point where I think I understand the basics of the dice mechanics. And so I ordered myself some of the dice, because after looking at it, I realized that the specialty dice that Free League makes for this game would make it a lot easier to play. Yeah, as someone with a visual impairment, that is going to be the case here. But I wanted to talk about that. I'm going to move the camera a little bit. I wanted to talk about that because as someone with a visual impairment, the usability of things like specialty dice and books is very important to me. That is one thing that Free League has done really well. The layout of their books thus far that I've seen, as far as the Forbidden Lands stuff. I haven't delved too deep into the other Free League game stuff that I own yet. We'll cover that when I do. The layout's been really good. There's been lots of spacing. There have not been, everything's been very legible. I haven't had a lot of crazy fonts to try to decipher. So that's been really good. And I think that they've done a great job with that. So please don't be afraid. In fact, actually, I can show you right here, right now, the Forbidden Lands Player's Guide. It's actually right next to me. And here it is. Yeah, just about halfway through. All right, but let's go. So the Forbidden Lands Player's Guide. This is this nice faux leather book. And actually, this is a great page to open to because this kind of showcases the layout. You've got double columns, and there are charts. There are illustrations. Not too many charts, though. No charts on this page, but there are some. But it's mostly illustrations. We have box text. The box text is clearly marked and well separated, so there's no, like, crazy thin margins. There are some books I've encountered that have crazy thin margins or no margins between the columns, and that really irritates me. So I may cover those books at some point just to kind of showcase something not to do if you are a prospective publisher. But just so you know, as someone with visual impairment, Free League, Forbidden Lands books, so far, A+, as far as that goes. Now, if you buy the PDFs and you print these out on an A4 size page, double-sided would be my recommendation if you have the printing capability, and bind it yourself, this would be even better because then it would be naturally enlarged because you can fit the PDF to the page. That's what I did with my OD&D books. You can fit the PDF image to the page, excuse me, print it out, and that's naturally enlarging all the text even more. And there are some things, I have one of those box sets that they did, the 25th, I think it was the 25th anniversary printing. Probably was longer than that. I think it was probably the 40th. Anyway, not important. The important part is I bought the box that was a reprinting of the original box set, and I enjoy it. I think it's really cool. And I enjoyed reading the little booklets, but some of the print sizes and some of the little tables they had were a bit smudged and a bit hard to read. Anyway, But blowing them up onto the full-size piece of paper the way that I did, and the way that I spiral bound it, and like I showed you, that worked really well. And I was very happy with that. So the same thing would work with Free League games and Forbidden Lands. But let's talk about something that is a little more hit and miss at the same time. That's the dice. Specialty dice. Specialty dice are something that, on the one hand, I like them. I like my little math rocks, and I don't mind collecting unique dice every once in a while for a game, especially if it's a game that I'm actively playing with friends and I'm going to have a good time with. I did pick up at one point a set of Fate dice. I probably still have them sitting around somewhere. I haven't used them in like 5 years or longer, and I really don't see when I'm going to ever use them again. So at some point, I may either gift them to somebody, or I don't know, they'll probably just exist in the bottom of one of my dice bags forever. Anyway, but that's the thing, is specialty dice that are only good for one game tend, while they can be really easy, make it a lot easier to play that game, especially things like Fate dice, they also bug me in a sense because they are so single use. They only do the one thing. They might do that one thing really well, but it is still only one thing. It's still only one game, and if you ever leave that game to play something else, then that dice, that purchase of dice, is no longer useful. And for someone who might be a little hard up or, stretched thin, that can be an annoyance. And there have been days there have been years when I have had a hard time justifying my hobby budget. Thankfully, this year is not one of them, but it has happened. And so I have a lot of empathy for the gamer who must game on the cheap side of things, or the affordable side of things. So specialty dice don't really fit in with that, because you're already going to pay a premium because they're specialty dice. So unless they're being made in like million dice lots by a dice maker that is used to making lots and lots of dice all at once in a factory, they're going to be more expensive, just like the Free League ones are. They're more expensive. They are fancy, which is cool, but each set is going to cost around $25. And the book itself says you probably will want 2 sets per player. So that suddenly becomes a $50 dice purchase. That's a lot of money. Now, I happen to really be enjoying Forbidden Lands, and I was willing to make that purchase. I was happy about that purchase, but I made it because I wanted to really see how the dice worked, and I wanted to experience the fullness of the game as it was intended to be played by the producer of the game, by the publisher. So let's look at those dice real quick. There are several different types. I'm going to get one of each, the main ones. So we got 6-sided dice. Let's see if I can get them in the camera a little bit better. I'm sorry, that was a bad shot. Okay, forgive my fingers. We have 6-sided dice. And each one of these colors, there's red, black, and white. Each one of these colors represents a different aspect of your character. One represents your character's ability scores. Another represents the character's equipment. And another represents the character's skill. So that's cool. And I like excuse me, just moving around. I like the color coding. I think that is a really neat idea, and I do support that. This very, very neatly done. It's not very effective for people who might have a visual impairment and need to use a dice rolling app, because unless you have a dice rolling app that will allow you to input specialty dice, excuse me, so that you can program it to use a Forbidden Lands dice set. And I'm not aware of such a program unless, yeah, maybe you could probably do a Discord mod in order to do that. But like, say, like the usual programs on the phone, not as much. Now, you don't need specialty dice as long as you remember the rules of how the numbers work. So that's a saving grace. All right, how does that work? So the ones are bad on the on the white dice and the black dice. Ones are bad because you see a little, there's a skull there. And that symbolizes that a bad thing has happened. All right? And on the other side, where the 6 is, you see that there's a nice, there we go. Little crossed sword there. Okay? Yeah, that's right. Little crossed swords, and that's a success. So, in a nutshell, in Forbidden Lands, a 6 or higher is a success. No matter what dice you're rolling. As long as you roll a 6 or higher, you've succeeded in that action, and you count out the number of successes that you have achieved. All right? Simple enough. The skulls, they are bad, and they will cancel out one of your successes. So it is possible to have negative success, or to really have not succeeded at all. So that's kind of neat. It's a neat idea. The part that makes me concerned about this and why it's a bit of a mixed bag is because they did something artistic with these dice. And what they did is all these dice have this really fancy, nice border around each of the faces. It's beautiful. It is well done. It is artistic. I can appreciate why they did it. And I don't want to, the artists that wanted to make this look fancy, totally understood, you know, respect that. As someone with a visual impairment, it makes the dice difficult to use because you can't read them quickly. Now, on the 6-sided dice, not as big of an issue because they're still, each of the faces on the 6-sided dice are fairly large. So even with my visual impairment, I can generally read these dice from about that distance away from my eyes. I can still read those, not a problem. Okay? I might have to get a little closer down to the table, but it's okay. And especially if I'm just playing this game with myself, because I don't know if my group is going to be interested in Forbidden Lands, and I kind of got interested into it for solo play anyway. So, we'll see. That's not that big of a thing. Where it gets more interesting, though, is with the D8s, D10s, and D12s. So let's look at those. There's the D10, but I want the D8. All right, so the D8. Let's get to, here we go. There's the big side on the D8. I don't know how well you can see that, but that's an 8 with 2 crossed swords. Okay? Surrounded by a border. The only way I can read this at a proper distance is by memorizing the fact that it is a triangular shape, just like every other phase. The symbol is basically, like, I hold it back and it looks kind of like a weird skull and crossbones effect. And if I recognize that, then that's okay. But, you know, the 1X, because really the crossed swords just look like an X to me at this size. The 1X above the 6 looks very similar. So that makes it hard, okay? And then we look at a 7, and the 7 has a 7 over 1x. That's a little bit easier to see than the difference between the 6 and the 8. But you start to see what happens here. We're cutting down the size, but we're increasing the number of symbols. And doing so automatically makes it harder for someone with a visual impairment to see what you're doing or to see it quickly, which means that the game is going to slow down while they're reading it, which means that some of the tension of the moments that you're trying to create will be lost. Not might, will be. Because there's going to be a lot of, I don't know, kind of noises going on while that person's trying to read it. And then, or they're going to be spending their time going, and while you'll be like, are they moving the die around and changing the side, or are they just moving it around so they can actually read the die? And if you're one of those DMs who hates when players pick up their dice in order to read the die in dice shape, then I recommend that you never play Forbidden Lands with someone with a visual impairment, because you'll come out the jerk in the end of that one. They're beautiful dice. I do love the art that has gone into these, but as far as usability, it's not the greatest thing. And the D10 is worse. Let's see if I can get, here we go. All right, the 10 side. Look at that. So, from my perspective, how can I tell that that's the 10? Well, I basically look for something that resembles the Triforce in my fuzzy little vision here on my glasses and say, oh, well, that's probably the 10, because nothing else here looks exactly like the Triforce. But I've got all these two, because I basically, and what I mean by that is I've got 3 X's, one above and then 2 below, and that makes a vague triangle shape, and so therefore Triforce. It's also yellow over blue, Triforce. Okay, that's why. It's not the best. It can work. It's not the worst I've seen in my life, and it is beautiful, and the color combinations are great, and I do enjoy that aspect of this thing. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm just pooping on the dice choices all over the place. They're beautiful. They're well made. There's a lot of beautifully well-crafted dice out there that are not accessible to people with visual impairments. And that's not a problem for the most part, as long as it's the person with the visual impairment is not the one who you're expecting to roll the dice. If you're expecting the person with visual impairment to roll these dice that have an inclusion in them and then don't have the numbers, filled in with a different color, they probably aren't going to see that. And if you got someone with visual impairment and you want to give them dice, I would check with them carefully to make sure that you're giving them the kind of dice that not only they want, but they will actually use. So be careful with those things. It's easy to get fancy. It's easy to be like, oh, this is so beautiful. It's a work of art. I want to do this. And I've gotten, dice sets. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a great set. And I'm thinking in my head, I will never use this. But I'm not going to tell the person that. That would be rude. It's like looking a gift horse in the mouth kind of thing. Someone's giving you a gift. That's a wonderful thing, and you are always going to be appreciative of that. Even if you probably will never use the die. It's such a beautiful set, it may sit on your shelf and be like, that is a beautiful dice set that I own. And maybe you'll trot them out every once in a while, just to show the person that gave them to you that you are using them. But it's kind of like, yeah. Now, let's get to the piece de resistance of this dice set, which is the D12. It's the one orange die in the set. The D12, in some ways, is worse, but in some ways is also a little bit better. And here's why. It is an orange die with black lettering. So that the contrast is greater. Also, instead of tinier triangles or pizza slices, we've got a whole bunch of, you know, 5-sided shapes. A lot more room on each one. But let's bring this home. Here we go. That's the one I want. The one that has the 12 on it. Okay. Here is the most busy of the sides. So you have the 12 side with 4 little X's on there. Now, my camera is actually enlarging this when I look at it a little bit. So I can actually see that fairly well at this distance when I'm showing it to myself on the camera. Looking at it with just my glasses, I can kind of make it out. It's not that big of a deal. But it has to be at this distance in order for me to do that reliably. And that's with my bifocal. So if I was to be playing this game with someone who is a stickler for not picking up your dice, I would be spending a lot of time bent over the table trying to read this die. All right, now, thankfully, my intention when I'm playing this is I'm just playing with myself in the sense of just solo gaming. And therefore, the only person that I have to worry about is me. And I know that I'm not cheating on my dice because that would defeat the whole purpose of playing a solo game. Why would you play a solo game and then cheat? It's like, hey, you're literally only cheating yourself. This is like kind of dumb. Why would you do this? But anyway, those are the dice. I think they're neat. They're beautiful. They're well made. They're expensive, yes, but you know, that's fine. And the good part about it is, because the numbers are on there, I can use them as a regular dice set for other things. There's no D20, but there's other games that I have a lot of extra D20s. I can just throw a D20 and add it to the set, and I've already got everything I need, right? You know, it's not something to worry about. So what would I change as someone with a visual impairment in order to make this more accessible? 1, drop the border. Get rid of the border on the dice. Period. Done. Sorry, artists. It's beautiful, but it's not accessible. 2, I would enlarge the numbers. And then 3, if I'm choosing a symbol, I'm going to make it a little more solid instead of something artful. So that skull, for example, instead of being an outline of a skull, I would probably do like the entire skull is one color, and then you got the eyes, the color of the die. So you kind of see the eyes, you see the mouth, you see the nose, you know, the grin of the skull, and then everything else is your contrast color compared to the regular color of the die. That makes it a lot easier for the viewer to see it from a distance. That makes it a lot easier to recognize the symbol. It is less artistic. It's true, and I won't pretend otherwise. Then for the success things, the whole crossed swords deal, I think it's a neat idea. It's a different symbol, but when I'm looking at it from a distance, it just looks like an X. And X's tend to mean no. So if I was to make a custom set for me to use for Forbidden Lands 1, I would probably not even include the numbers on the dice whatsoever. I would leave the sides that, you know, don't factor in one way or the other as blank. Just put the skull on, put a big skull on the side that means, you know, failure. And then I would put stars instead of, you know, little stars instead of the X, basically, little asterisks. And then that's a more recognizable symbol. And even to someone with a visual impairment, as long as you can actually see the die, you can count like you're counting pips. Because the stars, even if they get blurry, you still see the large center part, right? And that would be helpful, because then on for example, the D12, If I roll the 12 side on the D12, then all I have to do is count 4 little stars. And everything else is 3 little stars or 2 little stars or 1 star. And then there's the skull at the bottom. So that's how I would improve that. Is it necessary? Like, am I going to go out and have a custom set made for this? No, I'm not going to do that. Not unless I suddenly am flush with money and don't care. Like a lottery ticket. Come this way, please. Just teasing. So, no, I'm not saying that the manufacturer needs to go back and retool their dice things and make new dice this way, you know, from now on, because you've done it wrong. Like, no, you don't need to do that. And I don't want to make people feel bad for enjoying those designs. Please enjoy them. Don't take this one guy saying, I didn't like this thing, to mean that you've made a mistake. You haven't. They're beautiful. And the market of people who have visual impairments, who can't read that thing, it's not insignificant, but it's not major either. And most of us are really used to finding workarounds for things. It's okay. But if you do want to be, accessible, and you want to make accessible stuff, then that's why I talk about this stuff, is for those people that have an interest in making things accessible and a passion for it in the same way that I kind of do as well. So that's what that's there for. So please don't take this as me looking at publishers and saying you're doing it wrong, because you're not. You're beautiful, you're wonderful, keep doing what you're doing. Just think about these things if you're interested in, and maybe make alternate versions of things that are more accessible. But the other part of it is, like I said, there are charts that explain how the dice work just based upon the numbers. And at that point, I can get any dice set that I have, including my large print dice that are these big old Mondo dice that have big numbers on them. And I love those dice. Thank you, Chessex. You're beautiful for making those kind of large dice. They're a lot easier for people that have, like, problems with their muscles in their hands. They're easier for those people to roll. And for those of us that have a hard time seeing things, they're easier to read. At some point, I might have one handy and I'll show you what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, show you a size difference. It's impressive. But the point is that I can do that, and I can play Forbidden Lands that way. Someone with a visual impairment, it's okay. There are workarounds. I find it funny, and I enjoy pointing out these things. I hope you enjoyed some of that too. I am enjoying Forbidden Lands. I'm enjoying digging into it. I love the sandbox / hex crawl aspect of it so far. I haven't gotten too deep into that, but the world is interesting. The world seems like a fun place. Not a fun place to be, because it's actually pretty dark and grim, but, or gritty, I should say, not really grim, because that's more like a 40K grim and dark thing, and it's not 40K, which is a good thing. Thank you. But I am enjoying it, and I think it will be fun, and I'm looking forward to continuing the read. So hopefully there'll be more Forbidden Lands content in the future, but for right now, I'm just reading it and having fun, and I thought the dice amused the heck out of me when I saw them, and I thought, I should probably talk about this. But yeah, like, what have your experiences with dice been? Like, are there sets that you all have that you enjoy, that you love? Is there, does anyone have like a set that they've kept for, 30 or more years, and the edges of all, kind of worn down? I got a D20, is my first D20. I think I still have it somewhere. One of the sides actually chipped off. Like, I got a chunk that came off that thing. I just rolled it one day and boop, it came off. It's really weird. It must have been a bubble. And I was so sad when that happened. It happened like 10 years ago. And I'd had that one since I was in like, I was in middle school, I think, when I got that die. Yeah, I was in middle school. That's an old die. Dang. So, I'm sure most of you would be like, that's not old. You're making me feel old. And yeah, you're probably right. Makes me feel old, though. So, all right. Cheers. It is water. I like drinking normal drinks out of extraordinary cups. It's fun. Thank you very much for coming by for this video. I hope you got something fun out of it. And if you did, please like the video, leave me a comment, share your stories. I will say I do know one person who is more visually impaired than I am, and their favorite set of dice are what they refer to as sneeze dice, because they're so tiny that when you sneeze, they fly across the room. I do not understand this person. I do not understand at all. I have been close with this person. They are, their family. And that is their thing. Like, they love these dice. I do not get it. As someone with visual impairment, I don't get it at all because I can't read them. They can barely read them. But it's their favorite dice. So don't think that because I'm saying something means that all people with visual impairments feel the same way. It is not true. It is not the case. I just try to represent things as I have, experienced them for my personal self, and maybe things that have gleamed through my experience through my job. But that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be outliers of people who, think that, making dice accessible has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So, I welcome all opinions. I welcome discourse. I'm always up for that sort of thing. Constructive criticism is always welcome as well, especially constructive criticism. Non-constructive criticism, I'm teasing. Let's have some fun. Let's enjoy ourselves. This is a great hobby, great fun. And let's get back to the exit because I really need to stop doing these Midwest goodbyes. So thank you very much. Please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And I hope to see you all in the future. I am going to try to get back into Forbidden Lands and reading this some more. And I do want to do some more stuff with Cypher System in the future. I've got a whole rack of Numenera behind me. That's on the to-do list. But I do want to read it some more. And I got to be very careful because I actually there's a DM that is going to be running a Numenera campaign, and I'm going to be a player in it in the future. And I'm trying to be careful about what I read and don't read and talk about and don't talk about so I don't spoiler myself too much. So there's that. That's one of the reasons why Numenera is on the shelf, but is not necessarily on the channel yet. So, but I'll get into that more as time goes on, and we'll figure all those things out. So, thank you. I'm not going to do the outro again. Because if I did, it would be time number 3 for this video. I hope you all have a good night. Stark says hi. He's just on his perch on this side of the room. Peace be with you, and goodbye.